Hey guys, welcome back. Finally, we're in the last episode of this series, and I hope you enjoyed everything so far. I really apologize for this taking so long to finish. I just didn't have the opportunity to record this since I've been so busy with some personal stuff. Today, we're going to add the edit feature to our users data table created using React and Laravel. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Now, the first thing that we'd like to do is define a way for us to know the mode of the form modal. We only have two modes, create and update. Since we are going to use the same form modal that we used for the create feature, we need to find a way for us to be able to tell if we are editing the user or not. So, we need to add a new state variable, which in our case is the form mode. This variable tracks this particular state and serves as a flag that will allow us to determine if we are going to run the create or update. So let's set the form mode variable to have a create value. This will help us figure out whether or not we're creating a new user or editing an existing one. I understand that we've already created the handle create user function to handle the create user action, but since we're making an update, we have to find a way to figure out whether or not what we are currently doing is creating or editing. Since we're using the same form modal, we have to create this kind of distinction, and this is why we're creating the update user function as well. So we have two of them, create user and update user. Also notice how on the update user function, we're passing the user ID. In our user interface, we update our edit button and call the update user function and passing the user ID, like this. OnClick, and then let's call the update user and passing the user ID. Alright. After that, we'll pass the form mode state variable as props to the form modal component. This ensures that the form modal component will always know whether the user is in create mode or edit mode. I'm considering a method to test this. I want to confirm whether the form mode variable shifts to create when I click the create button and changes to update when I click one of the edit buttons. So let me just write a sample text here, and let's say, okay, so if form mode equals create, I will display the create text. Otherwise, I'll display the update. Note that I'm using a ternary operator here to condense my if-else condition. On second thought, let's integrate this section into our user interface. And let's not forget to actually pass the form mode as one of the props for the form modal component like this. Oh, and don't forget to pass the user ID as well, because we'll need it for the update method. Otherwise, our code won't know which user to edit. So, when we go to our browser, clicking the create button will display the create text, and clicking the edit button will show the update text along with the user's ID number. Another issue we need to address is that when updating a user, all the fields displayed here should be populated with the respective user's information, and that's exactly what we're going to tackle. So, We'll need to create another state variable called default user data, which will store the values for all the user fields. This should be an array since we're storing the email, password, first name, and last name. The next thing I wanted to do here is to make sure that when the createUser function runs, it sets the default user data to empty. Additionally, we're going to modify the updateUser function so that it can receive a user data object when it runs. You can see how simple it is to add new features when we keep them separate. We need to go back to our onClick event here and make sure we pass the user object instead of just passing the user ID. Then, in our Form Modal component, we're also going to pass the default user data as one of the props. Instead of leaving the form states blank, we should pass whatever data we expect from the default user data props. We know that the default user data props should have the email, password, first name, and last name values. So let's set them as the default values for our state variables. And we'll have to make sure to pass the default user data as one of the props here. And if we go back to the browser, you'll notice that every time we click the edit button for a specific user, the form dynamically populates with that user's data. Now that we have that, let's create a new function to handle updating a user. We need to receive the user data as the parameter. Yeah, this is quite similar to the handle create user function. So we'll just copy and paste the one from above. The one that says axios.post, that one. However, this time we'll use the put method to inform our REST API endpoint that we are updating an existing resource. And of course, we need to pass the user ID into the query parameter, just like we have set this up in Laravel. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, it's really up to you to add inline documentation to your function or methods, but I highly recommend it. Doing so will make your functions or methods more descriptive. Now, since the handle submit will be handling two different tasks, we need to ensure that the form mode state variable's value is equal to create. Otherwise, we know that we are updating the user. So, an if-else statement will do just fine here. And yeah, when the form mode is create, we run the handle create user function, which makes an API call to create a user. Otherwise, we run the handle update user, which makes an API call to update a user. And we have already created that above. And since we're not just creating a user now, I'll have to change the button label of our form modal to simply just say save, so that it accurately reflects both creating and editing a user. So, when testing the functionality of the update user, you may notice a problem where the values in our data table aren't updated. However, you find that the user's data is actually updated when checking our localhost database in phpMyAdmin, and we'll only see that the data is updated when we reload the page. Now, we're going to solve that. Let's head back to our code and chain a method called finally and we're going to put that here. So this method comes from Axios, which allows you to run any code right after every request has finished. Since we already have a fetch user function, we'll just have to pass it as one of the parameters in our form modal component. This way, we'll see the data table updating right after hitting the save button. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Now, if we test this, we will indeed see that the data table is updated in real time. So if we edit this and then remove these letters, save, and you'll see that the data is updated in real time. But we have another problem. If we go to the last page and let's say update a user, you'll notice that as soon as I hit save, the page leads us back to the first page, which is not very ideal for the user experience. It's kind of like refreshing the page entirely. So let's find a way to resolve that by updating our API call under the finally callback, since this is the last callback that is being run. To do that, we need to have the meta information provided by Laravel, specifically the value of the current page. So let's go ahead and do that. So now when you test it, you'll see that even after updating, it stays on the same page, which is what we want. So if we type in test and then another test, save, and it stays on the same page, or at least that's what I want. Okay, let's try to check the inspect tool and see if there's an error here. Oh, so we got one and it says meta is not defined. So let's try to figure this out. So meta.current page, meta is not defined. Okay, let's try to scroll up. Okay, so we forgot to add the meta as a props. So let's go ahead and refresh the page and we'll see that the issue is gone. Now if we go back to the last page and then edit this again, save, and there you go. The next thing we want to do is to apply the same approach when creating and deleting users. So let's go ahead and do that. And don't worry about the meta is not defined in red there because I'm not really sure what's going on with Console Ninja. And that's just that's just the extension that I used for the console.logs. So let's go ahead and copy this and then paste it into our handle create user. So we're going to do the same thing as we did on the update user. And we're also going to do the same with the delete functionality. So let's pass a meta object here. Pass it as one of the props. Meta, then meta. Alright, so before we continue, let's try to check if the add user functionality is working correctly. And let's go to the last page so that we can see if it works correctly. Okay, let's put in a random email, test, save, and you'll see that it doesn't take us back to the first page, which is what we want. Now let's go back to our code and go to the delete modal.jsx file and try to see if we can make this work here. So let's add the dot finally callback, which is the same thing that we did on the update and create user. Let's try to delete that here. Confirm. Alright, so it refreshes the page, which is not what we want. So let's go back to our code and try to see if there's something wrong here. And there it is. So we have the window.location. So let's remove that because it refreshes the page after we make an API call. And we're not gonna be needing the finally here because we're just gonna delete the user. And then after deleting the user list, we're just gonna fetch the list of the users again. And let's I think this approach works here. So delete, and then the dot then callback, we're gonna put the fetch user. And it's not working still, so there's something wrong here. Alright, so let's try to check if there is an error here on the console. So there's none, and let's try to see. Okay, so I forgot to pass the fetch users method as one of the props, so that was my mistake. And let's, yeah, I think, alright, so I think that's okay now. So let's go back to the last page and try to test this again. Delete, confirm, and still not working. So there might be something here. Okay, there's no error, so let's go back to our code. Oh, sorry about this. I forgot to pass the fetch users here as a parameter on the delete modal component. I'm real sorry about that. So again, let's refresh the page and add another user. Okay, let's add another random user to test this. Test, save. And then let's go to the last page and let's add another user again. Alright, so gmail.com, test, random, save. And let's test this by deleting the last one. So let's click confirm, and it works. So it didn't take us back to the previous page, which is what we really want. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It took a bit longer than expected, and I really apologize for the wait. Now that we've wrapped it up, I'm considering covering more web technologies in the future. So if you liked what you saw, please hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Looking forward to sharing more with you in the next video. Take care and see you soon.